Welcome back, my friends. This is part 2 of us creating a volcanic eruption using Procreate Dreams. In this tutorial, we'll be adding the billowing clouds. If you haven't completed part 1, you can find that video linked in the notes. I have to say, I'm so excited to show you one of my all-time favorite brushes to create the sparks, and how to bring this desolate landscape to life using sound effects. That rumble changes the whole vibe of the piece. So let's pick up where we left off and jump right in. So our next chunk of animation is going to be the clouds coming out of the volcano. So I'm going to go to the white clouds that I did, and I'm going to start a new track right on top. See this white line here? This shows you which part of the animation you're on. So you just want to make sure you start at 0 seconds, and then you're going to start a new flipbook. And we're going to set up a whole new pattern. So the clouds are going to be a pure black. And then if I go back to my recent brush set, I'm going to grab the looper brush, but this time I'm going to tap on it. I'm going to increase some of these stabilization settings. So this is going to control how smooth the brush is, and I'm going to essentially set each one of these sliders right in the middle. And they don't have to be exactly 50%, just anywhere in the middle is fine. So with the cloud, we're going to be setting up 2 different patterns. One pattern is that the cloud is always moving upward, kind of like the lava was always moving downward. And then as the clouds move up, they also get bigger. So let's start on the left side of our shape. And the way we're going to represent this is with circles. So we're going to start off with small circles, getting a little bit bigger each time. You can see I'm kind of leaving the same amount of space between each one of them. And then the last one, actually probably redraw that one. The last one is going to be clear off your page like this. So we're going to kind of be connecting this. Now you can see I'm not getting too fussy with this shape. It does not have to be perfect. We're just setting up a pattern and creating a guide for ourselves. So that's the left side, and then I'm going to work on the right side. The right side, I want it to kind of push into this empty space on my canvas. So I might end up with more circles on this side. And for that last one, I don't really need to do another one like this. I mean, I could if I wanted to, but this one is well enough off the page that it will work. So what this represents is the edges of my cloud. And what I want to show you is what we're going to do with these bubbles before we move on. You don't need to do this. I'm just going to give you an idea of where we're headed. So we're going to create these bubbles, and then we're going to just color them in like this. And this is going to create the overall shape of our cloud. So that's what our cloud is going to look like. So just like we did with our lava, we want this to be a repeating pattern. And so we have to make sure by the time we make it to the end of our flipbook, it looks like how we started. So just like we did before, we're going to start a new track, and I'm going to copy this one and then paste it. And then when I go to the magic wand, I'm going to use hue, saturation, and brightness, but I can't change the color because it's already black. So I'm going to just change it to white. And then I'm going to hold down on this one, and I'm going to extend it the full duration of my flipbook. Okay, great. So we're going to go to this bottom track, and we're going to go to the second page in our flipbook. And then we want to create this motion of these bubbles moving upwards. So I'm going to draw the next little circle like that. And you can see how little space I've left. It's not like the lava. There isn't like a big gap. You definitely want these to be overlapping, because we want to move things a little bit slower than we did for the lava. And it might be tempting to kind of shift the bubble over to the left or right, but you want to really kind of maintain that trajectory of just going straight up and kind of replacing the next bubble, because that's what our loop is going to be dependent on. Okay, great. So that's what the second page in your flipbook should look like. And then we're going to move on to the third one. And here, of course, we need our onion skins to see what we're doing. So I'm just going to toggle those on. The settings should already be looking good. So now I'm just kind of going off of the purple and continuing this pattern that I've set up. Okay, so I've made it to frame number 6. This is kind of the halfway point, and this is probably a good time to think about replacing that circle at the very bottom and then continuing that one. So right here at the bottom, it's just kind of like peeking through. We can't really see it yet, but we want to kind of continue the bubbles. So at this point, you can kind of just keep going with this pattern. And then let's pause the video here, and we're going to meet back at frame number 9, where we can just make sure that we time this so that we can get back to the white circles in the last couple of frames that we have. Okay, so I've made it to frame number 9, and this is where we have to make sure that we kind of plan for, I'm going to use this circle as an example, so that by frame 12, it's almost at this white circle. It's almost replaced it. So we know we have 4 frames to go, so I'm going to kind of divide each section into quarters and make sure that, like, so if this one is going to be here, the next one is going to be there, and then by 4, I'm just before that line. And we're going to want to keep that in our thoughts for the last 4 frames. So each one might be a little bit different. You can see if I split this one into 4, that's the kind of spacing that I'm looking for. And if the spacing changes a little bit between now and when you first started, it's not a big deal. And you don't have to worry about this last bubble here. The ones at the top, I mean, they're not really trying to get anywhere. They're just going off the page. So don't worry about like kind of planning that one out. And in my experience, the bottom bubbles, you're going to want to move them less and then create more spacing for the bigger bubbles. And the great thing about these patterns is once you kind of learn them and get the hang of them, they do repeat a lot. So you can see we've kind of used the same pattern for both the clouds and the lava, even though they're like completely different things. They still follow that pattern of like moving up or down and kind of having to plan that. Okay, so I'm on my last 2 frames, so here I really have to get this sorted and make sure that by frame 12, I'm 1 frame off from getting back to my original starting position. And don't be too fussy about those bottom bubbles. Those are going to kind of get rounded up in our general kind of cloud shape. So if you've already kind of like completed the cycle there, and you don't have enough space, don't worry about that. It's mostly these big bubbles that matter. And actually this one is well off, so I can probably start ignoring it. I probably could have ignored it a little bit earlier, to be honest, but so really in the last frame, on frame number 12, really think about how it's going to change from the purple to the white and whether that motion will make sense. Okay, great. So pause the video here if you need a little bit more time with these circles. And then to test out your animation, you kind of want to zoom in so that it's kind of cut off where that line is, and then remove the white bubbles there with the checkbox, and then you can play it. And what you're looking for is that feeling that those bubbles are continuously moving upward like that. So that looks pretty good if you want to compare. Okay, great. So now we're on to the next part. So what we're going to do, starting on that first one, I'm going to start connecting the bubbles with these kind of shapes like this. And I actually like to turn off the stabilization for this, so I'm going to zero these ones back in. It's going to allow me to work faster and kind of create more interesting shapes. So these don't matter, they're not following a pattern, they're just literally connecting the shape. When you get to the top here, I don't even actually need to connect that last bubble. I just want to like draw a line through the top. And there's a giant hole right here, so I'm going to do like a U shape to connect it. And then I'm going to color it in. I'm going to warn you right now, the color is going to spill out. You're going to have to like work with it to kind of figure out where the little gaps are. But a little trick that you can use, when you first put the color in, you can tap on continue filling here, and then you can just tap. This is definitely going to speed up your workflow. So this is what the cloud is going to look like. It looks awful at the top here, so we just really care about this kind of view. So when you go to the second page, it's probably a good idea to turn off your onion skins. And then we're just going to complete this step of filling in all of our clouds. So of course, this is just going to be very tedious and take a long time. That's just kind of how animation goes. But because we've tested out our frames and we know we have the pattern right, this is going to look pretty awesome at the end. It's so much easier to do tedious work when you're confident that you're going to end up with something that you like. Great, so pause the video here. You can finish all 12 frames and then we'll meet back for the next part. Okay, great, so I'm just finishing up with frame number 12. And then we're just going to test it out before we move on. So I'm going to zoom in again, cut off that top part because it does look really awful. And then we're going to play it. And this is what the cloud looks like. So just like we did with the lava, we're going to hold down on our flipbook here and duplicate after. And we're going to make as many copies as we need to get to the end. And here you do really want to test out your animation, make sure that there isn't any glitches. If you do notice anything weird, just tap 2 fingers to go back and redo it. Often that will fix the problem. So now I want to kind of see what my cloud would look like without really clean edges like this. So we're going to try grouping it and then we can check that out. So this is my group button here. And I can draw a line through all of these cloud flipbooks that I did, and I'm going to hold down on one of them and group them, and it kind of creates this continuous track for me. And whenever you use the group button, just make sure you turn it off after because it does kind of cause problems. And right now I am set to keyframe, and I'm going to tap on my action button. I'm going to go filter and Gaussian blur. So make sure you're doing this at 0 seconds, and we can just see what our cloud would look like more blended. Obviously that would be like way too much. I'm gonna try it at like 5%, and then I can kind of play it. It applies it to the whole thing, and I think that actually looks a little bit better, but it's really up to you. If you liked it more in the solid state, you can leave it there. The other thing I want to do is I don't want this to be a solid black. Often when volcanoes are doing their thing, the area here is kind of reddened. So again, I'm going to go back to the start of my animation, and I'm going to switch it to compose because it's less likely to cause problems there. So I'm going to make sure I'm on my cloud here at the start, and then I'm going to start a new track right above the cloud. And again, I'm going to use the drawing option. Okay, so we're going to go into our brushes and go to airbrushing and find the soft brush. The color that I have picked out is kind of a vibrant red like this. And both my opacity and my size is set to 30%. And then we're just going to gently brush on this red color. And don't worry that the red color is going off the cloud here. We're going to be using a clipping mask to adjust it. We just want this nice gradient here. And my gradient has covered up too much of the black space. So I'm just going to use my arrow and kind of push this down. If yours looks too patchy, you can also go to the magic wand and pick out Gaussian blur. Just swipe your pen to the right and it's going to just smooth it out even more. Now if we jump back to the timeline, we can take this track. You can see kind of the red hue on it, and I'm going to hold down on it and I'm going to go mask and then clipping mask. And then it's going to clip that track to our cloud. And if you test it out, you can see the benefit of doing it this way. This hue has applied itself to a moving object, and we don't have to color it in frame by frame. And then I'm also noticing that this track has ended up a little bit shorter. You can see it's not matching up with the other ones. And because there's no animation built into it, we can just extend it out like this. Okay, so let's start another new track. And this time we're gonna make this into a flipbook. Okay, so here we're gonna set up the pattern of the sparks flying out of the volcano. So let's go to our brushes. We're gonna do a big pinch to find the classic library. Then here on the left, we're going to go to luminance and find the Lightpen. This is one of my all-time favorite brushes. And we're going to turn on a little bit of stabilization for this brush. So for each one of the settings, we can kind of set it in the middle. It doesn't have to be exactly 50%, just something like this is fine. For the color, I'm actually using the same color as I did before. And then my brush size is set to 20%. So when the sparks fly out of the volcano, they're going to start off quite large like this. And I tend to want to draw them with like a thicker top, and then it kind of trails off and gets thinner. I'm doing this because I have a pressure sensitive brush. If you can't get that to work, that's okay. It could just be a line like that and it will work out just fine. Then as the sparks get further away from the volcano, they're just going to get a little bit shorter. until finally they kind of dissipate up here. So this is kind of the pattern that we're setting up. And then because everything else is a looping animation, we do want to kind of get back to where we started. So we're going to start a new track here and then copy this frame and paste it up here. Great, and then let's just change the color of this so we remember what we're looking at. So I'm going to go to the magic wand and go to hue, saturation, and brightness. And again, I think I'm just going to stick with a blue color. Okay, and then we're going to extend this the full length. So I'm going to hold down on it and extend it 12 frames like that. So we're going to just ignore this for now. It really doesn't matter until we get to the end. So let's keep going with our pattern. So I'm on the second page in my flipbook, and I'm going to kind of keep extending the path of these sparks. And just remember to make them a little bit shorter every single time. And this is a really good pattern for a lot of things. So if I was doing like fireworks, I'd be actually creating a very similar kind of pattern. Okay, so let's move on to the third page, and then we're gonna just make sure we have our onion skins on. So remember to ignore the blue. We're just focusing on the purple right now. So we're gonna kind of keep extending. And you just wanna remember that these sparks will eventually completely dissipate. So their path will kind of end at some point. On page 4, I'm going to start thinking about replacing new sparks coming out of my volcano. Okay, so you can kind of keep going with this pattern, and let's meet up on page number 9. Okay, great. So I made it to page 9, and this is where we kind of have to plan for these sparks that we already have on our page to kind of get started. So I'm going to think about the sparks that are furthest away from my volcano, and kind of think about the sparks that would have to fly out of the volcano to make it to this point in 4 frames. And I'm going to be honest with you, this part is pretty forgiving. So even if you don't plan it out perfectly, it'll probably still work out. So I'm focusing on this spark here, and this one is going to start like that. And I'm just going to ignore these like little ones at the top. I'm just kind of focusing on these larger ones and making sure they have like a nice connection. So now I've accounted for those 3. So in my next page, I have 3 more pages to kind of line those up. So that looks pretty good. And now I have to account for the sparks coming out for those ones, and they'll connect in like 2 pages. So it's going to look like this. And don't worry about these sparks here already coming out of the volcano. We don't really have to establish a path for them. Okay, so I'm on frame number 12, and you can kind of see how this all lines up. So this spark is going to become this one. So I'm just going to kind of do something in between here. And then this spark is going to become this spark, so I'm going to just do kind of an in-between shape. Okay, so let's turn off our blue sparks, and then we can see what all of that looks like. So yeah, it kind of gives it a nice fireworks feel. Okay, so that pattern looks pretty good, and it loops well. But even if yours isn't, what we can do is kind of mask it by going back to frame number 1. I'm actually going to turn off my onion skins for this so I can see a little bit better. So I'm just kind of filling out some of the empty spaces. And these are essentially random. They don't have a pattern that they follow. So we can kind of just put them wherever just to kind of fill out this shape. Think of this as like confetti. So you can see, especially on this page, it's like I have a lot of empty space. You can also do just like little dots would work really well. Okay, so that's what it looks like with the confetti, and I think that's a big improvement. So we're going to wrap up our project, so we're going to go to our timeline. And then because this is a flipbook with an animation built into it, we're going to hold down on our flipbook, and we're going to go duplicate after. So you're going to duplicate after to the very end. Now to really test out our animation, you're going to do a 4-finger tap here on the screen. Now you can see it in full screen. It looks really good. The only thing missing from our animation is sound. So you can use the QR code or the link below. So I'm going to link my current favorite website. Right now that's Pixabay, but it could change. The reason that I like it is because it's free and you don't even need a login. And we're going to want to make sure that we're set to sound effects right here. And then think about how to describe your sound. So for this one, I put in the word rumble. And the one that I really like is called Earth Rumble. You can press play to preview it. I've also linked the sound file below just in case you can't get access to this. So to download it, you're going to tap on this little symbol here, and then look for this little circle with the arrow pointing down. Here's the name of our sound. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab it and then open up Dreams. See how it's kind of floating around? It really doesn't matter where you put the sound. I generally put it here at the bottom. And it's really that easy. So just like your other tracks, you want to make sure that this starts at 0 seconds. I'm going to kind of drag it and move it over. It doesn't matter if there's a bunch of it kind of hanging off the edge, but if you do want to cut it, all you have to do is put the marker there, hold down, and then go split content. And then you can just take this extra piece here and delete it. And it's really that easy. So now that we have our sound, let me show you how to export the project. So we're going to go over here to share, and because it has sound, you're going to want to use video. And then you're going to want to save the video to your photos. And that's it, my friends. That's a wrap on our Volcano. I hope you enjoyed the project and picked up a few new animation tricks along the way. I post new tutorials each week, so don't miss the next great tutorial I've got cooking. Adios, amigos.